understand payroll very slowly, because payroll is something that is highly conceptual in nature. That is a wrong notion among the people. People think that payroll is much more focused on calculation. Calculation is nothing if the concept is clear to you. That is why focus on the concept, calculation will automatically come. Now, try to understand the components can be anything depending on the CNB policy of the company, right? But when a particular company is there in the industry, definitely they will follow some industry standard practices, right? So when we are discussing the CTC structuring, we need to understand what are the predominant components that can form the part of these particular categories, right?
Yes.
Now,
there is one component which is actually a mandatory component, that is called basic. Remember, basic is a mandatory component that you have to have in your salary structure or CTC structure. So this is the mandatory component of any CTC structure, that is called basic. So what is the rule of basic? The rule of basic is it can be anything between 40% to 60% of CTC. The rule is basic can be anything between 40 to 60% of CTC, but I will suggest to keep it 50% of CTC. But I will suggest to keep it 50% of CTC. Right? So, if I want to calculate this in Excel, the CTC is what? The CTC is 5 lakhs and it will be 50% of my CTC. This is the formula. Why 5 lakhs? Because my CTC is 5 lakhs. As you can see on the screen, my CTC is 5 lakhs, and that's why I have created the formula 5 lakhs into 50%. That means what will be my amount? My amount will be 5 lakhs into 50%. This is the amount of my basic. This is the amount of my basic, which is 50% of the CTC. The rule is it can be anything between 40 to 50% or rather 40 to 60% of CTC. But I will suggest to have it 50% because from the next year this rule will come. The basic should be 50% and the formula is 5 lakhs into 50%, that is the CTC into 50%, and this is the amount. And as I mentioned, that this is the mandatory component. Now, the next component we can have is house rent allowance. House rent allowance. Or I can call it in short HRA. The next component and most common component is house rent allowance or HRA. What is the rule for this? The rule is 50% of basic. The last one was 50% of CTC, but here the rule is the calculation will be on basic. 50% of basic if the working location is a metro location, and 40% of basic if the location is a non-metro location. So the house rent allowances will be as per the basic and as per the location. If you are working in a metro location, it will be 50% of basic, and if you are working in a non-metro location, it will be 40% of your basic. So what is the location of this example?
It's a metro.
It's a metro location, so how much will be the percentage?
50%.
50% of what? Which one?
Basic.
Percent of basic. So what is my basic amount?
2,50,000.
2,50,000 into 50%.
5 into
50%.
So this is the formula. Why 2,50,000? Because this is my basic amount that we have calculated in the
It's a basic salary.
right. So I will now calculate the amount. It will be 1,25,000. 1,25,000. this is how we can calculate the HRA. So we have calculated two components already. We have calculated basic. We have also calculated HRA. The next couple of components that I can include is conveyance allowances.
Travel allowance.
So there are many allowances and many options, as I mentioned, that you can decide on what are the allowances or what are the components that you are going to use for your company. There is no such rule. Basic HRA, कुछ component होता है जो mandatory होता है, कुछ component होता है वो आपके ऊपर depend करता है, आपके company के ऊपर depend करता है कि आप कौन सा component को लोगे. So I am not showing you the component for everyone. So I'm just giving you some common component like conveyance allowance, medical allowance, leave travel allowance, etc. There are many more, but I'm not giving you all the information. So what are the rule for conveyance allowance? There is no rule. There is no rule. It will be decided by the company. It will be decided by the company that how much amount that you should have. It will be decided by the company for all three. So for conveyance allowance, for medical allowance, and for leave travel allowances, there is no such percentage or there is no such rule that will be decided by the company. But for the LTA allowance, it should not be more than 15% of basic. So the LTA or the leave travel allowances should not be more than 15% of basic. You can have any amount, but that should not be more than 15% of basic. So there is no such formula. But if I want to calculate the conveyance allowance, generally this is 1600 per month. Generally, this is not a rule. But generally the conveyance allowance, whenever we calculate, this is 16% per month. Generally. So let me put down the amount, as this is not a formula. I am writing down the amount directly, whatever I want to write down. So let's say 1500, 15,000, let's say 25,000, whatever it is. I have given you this one, right? So I have now designed 5 different components already in the receivable part: basic, HRA, conveyance allowance, medical allowance, and LTA or leave travel allowances, where basic is 40 to 60% of CTC. I will suggest to have 50%. So this is the amount, 2,50,000, which is a mandatory component. HRA, 50% of basic or 40% of basic, depending on the location. So the amount is 1,25,000. Conveyance allowance, medical allowance, and LTA, these are not mandatory, optional, and there is no such rule. So there is no such formula. But when I am calculating the conveyance allowances, generally it is 1600 per month. You can change it. And the LTA will be up to 15% of basic. Should not be more than 15% of basic. So I have mentioned some amount which is random in nature. As there is no such formula, I have considered some random number. You can also do that in that way.
So 15% is fixed for LTA.
This is not fixed. This is the suggestion or standard that it should not be more than 15% of basic. It should not be more than 15% of basic. Now, as I have told you some component for receivable part, I will start calculating some amount that will be a part of non-receivable part. And what is non-receivable part? That will not be received by the employee on month basis. What can be the non-receivable part? It can be gratuity. I'll discuss them. It can be Provident fund, employer. It can be employee, state, insurance or ESI. or ESI. Again, this is for employer. So I can have 3 or I may have many, but I'm giving you some standard example. I can have some gratuity as a part of my non-receivable part. I can have provident fund for employer. I can also have employee state insurance or ESI employer. Now let me tell you what they are. So when we are talking about provident fund, please understand the purpose of provident fund is it's a retirement fund. It's a retirement fund, and this amount will be paid to the employee after retirement. This provident fund amount, just a moment. I think you cannot see it, right?
We can see.
Yeah, it is visible.
It is visible.
You cannot see the PF part, right?
No, PF, gratuity, and ESI. All these are visible
Right.
on the screen.
It's visible.
Okay, it's visible, right? Great. So as you can see that in this particular provident fund option, it is basically for the employee to get the amount at the end of the retirement period or at the end of the employment period. So this is the retirement fund and it is managed by Government of India. The contribution will be both by the employee and the employer. The contribution will be both by the employee and the employer. The percentage of contribution for the employer is 12 to 13%. Some company do it 12%, some company do it 13%, but I will suggest to do it on 13%. And for employee, this is 12%. For employee, this is 12%. Right? Now, when we are calculating the CTC, please understand the employer part will be included in the CTC. Employee part will not be included in the CTC. I repeat, the employee part will not be included in the CTC. Only the employer part will be included in the CTC. So अभी हम लोग CTC डिजाइन कर रहे हैं. यहाँ पर हम लोग एम्प्लॉय का कंट्रीब्यूशन कंसीडर नहीं करेंगे. We are going to consider the contribution for the employer only. CTC के अंदर एम्प्लॉय का जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो कैलकुलेशन नहीं होता. बहुत सारे कंपनी करता है बट वो गलत है. So in the CTC we are supposed to include only the employer contribution of 13% or 12%. You can do any. We are going to discuss about the PF details in labor law during the PF Act. The same way, there is employee state insurance or ESI. What is the purpose? The purpose is to get free medical benefit by the employee. The benefit of free medical benefit will be received by the employee in different ESI hospital. अलग-अलग ESI hospitals है जहाँ पर सारे member को, if you are the member of ESI, you will get free medical benefits and treatment in ESI hospital, and this is also managed by Government of India. Like PF, in ESI also there are contribution by employer and employee both. यहाँ पर भी employer कुछ पैसा देता है, employee भी कुछ पैसा देता है. Employee देता है 3.25% और employee देता है 1.75%. लेकिन जैसे PF में हमने बताया, in the CTC we are supposed to include only the employer part. CTC के अंदर हम employer part को include करेंगे, लेकिन employee part को हम CTC के अंदर include नहीं करेंगे. And we are going to again discuss this in details during our labor law session. और एक हमने बताया था वहां पर gratuity. Gratuity is something that you will receive lump sum money after 4 years and 240 days. You will receive the money after 4 years and 240 days. This is managed by the company. यहाँ पर government का कोई rule नहीं है. There is no rule of government. It will be contributed only by the employer. यहाँ पर employer का खुद contribution होगा, employee का कोई contribution नहीं होगा. Right? So this can also be a part. लेकिन ये जो include हमने CTC के अंदर किया है, this part is very important. कुछ कंपनी CTC को gratuity को CTC के अंदर include करता है, कुछ कंपनी include नहीं करता है, and that's why I have mentioned that may or may not include in CTC. आप gratuity को CTC के अंदर रख भी सकते हो, नहीं भी रख सकते हो. So these are the three different non-receivable components that you can see in your CTC structure, which we are going to use now. So whenever you are talking about gratuity, which is having the formula of 4.81% of basic. So the gratuity का formula क्या होगा? 4.81% of basic. So in this particular case, what will be the formula? Someone can tell me? What will be the formula of gratuity here?
Basic
250,000 into 4.81%.
250,000 into 4.81%. That is the formula. So if I have to write down the Excel, this is the formula 4.81%. So this is the amount of gratuity that I have. Remember, as I also mentioned, that any company include this in the part in CTC. Any company may not include in CTC. This is optional. CTC gratuity जो amount है, ये आप CTC के अंदर डाल भी सकते हो, नहीं भी डाल सकते हो, वो company to company vary करता है. Then I will come to the Provident Fund, which is a part of employer contribution. As I mentioned that the
3.25.
13% or 12% of PF gross. Now you have to listen this carefully. 12% to 13% of PF gross, but I always suggest to have it 13% of PF gross. Now there is a new term that I have introduced that is called PF gross. So what is PF gross? You have to understand. PF gross is equal to, listen this very carefully. PF gross is equal to basic plus all allowances. Basic plus all allowances except HRA. PF gross equal to basic plus all allowances except HRA. HRA is not eligible for PF. I repeat, HRA is not eligible for PF. So PF gross is basic plus all allowances except HRA, and the calculation will be 13% of PF gross. So let me first calculate the PF gross. That is basic. 2,50,000 is the basic. 15,200 is the conveyance. 15,000 is the medical, and 25,000 is the LTA. So this is my PF gross. Am I clear on this? Am I clear on this?
Yes, sir.
So I have calculated the PF gross, which is basic plus all allowances except the HRA. Except the HRA. So if I do the total calculation, this plus this, basic plus basic plus conveyance plus everything, so I have come to this amount of 30920. So what is this called? 30920. What is this called? This is called PF gross. Right? So now if I come back to the formula, 309,200 into 13%. Is it right or wrong?
Yes.
So now I
Yes, sir.
have written down the formula, which is 309,200, which is my PF gross into 13%, right or wrong?
Right, sir.
But there is a catch. In this PF calculation, there is a limit of 1,80,000. There is a limit on PF calculation, that is 1,80,000. That means if your PF gross is more than 1,80,000, you cannot consider that amount, but you have to consider 1,80,000 only. I repeat, there is a PF gross limit of 1,80,000. So if you are calculating the PF gross, and if it is more than 1,80,000, then you have to calculate on 1,80,000. उससे ज्यादा के ऊपर आप calculate नहीं कर सकते हो. Is this clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what is the PF gross amount here? 3,09,200. So यहाँ पर I cannot calculate with 3,09,200, but I can to calculate with how much amount?
1,80,000.
1,80,000.
1,80,000 के ऊपर ही मेरा calculation होगा. So let me calculate on the basis of 1,80,000. So this is the PF amount. लेकिन अगर PF gross 1,80,000 से कम होगा तो क्या होगा? If
तो
the
वही
PF
count
gross
करेंगे.
is less than 1,80,000, what will happen?
We will count the less than
It
1,80,000.
will count on the basis of exactly that amount.
Yes.
अगर 1,00,000 होता है
Yes.
तो 1,00,000 के ऊपर 13%, 1,50,000 होता है
Yes.
तो 1,50,000 के ऊपर 13%, 1,70,000 होगा so 1,70,000 के ऊपर 13%. But the moment it will be more than 1,80,000, it will be calculated on 1,80,000.
Yes.
Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Any question?
Sir, why it is 1,80,000?
That is as per the PF Act, as per the Provident Fund Act government rule, we have to follow that rule. Why? We are going to discuss in detail. जब हम लोग PF Act के ऊपर लेबर लॉ में डिस्कस करेंगे, तब इसके ऊपर हम लोग और डिटेल्स में डिस्कस करेंगे कि क्यों 1,80,000 है. अभी उसके ऊपर हम डिस्कस नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि उसके लिए काफी और बहुत सारी चीजें हमको बोलना पड़ेगा. But yes, we are going to discuss during our labor law class about PF Act. Am I clear on this? How to calculate the employer PF?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
The
sir.
next one is employee state insurance. About the employer part, the formula or the rule is 3.25% of ESI gross. The rule of ESI is 3.25% of ESI gross. So now we have got to know another new term called ESI gross. So what is ESI gross? Let me tell you the percentage or the calculation of ESI gross now, which is basic plus all allowances, basic plus all allowances, except conveyance allowances. So what is ESI gross? ESI gross is basic plus all allowances except conveyance allowances. Conveyance allowances is not a part of ESI. Conveyance allowances is not a part of ESI. So if I have to calculate the ESI, I need to first calculate the ESI gross. So what will be the ESI gross formula? Can someone tell me now? What are the component I need to add?
Basic.
Basic is 2,50,000 plus
HRA,
HRA,
1,25,000.
HRA 1,25,000, then
15,000.
15,000. That is my medical allowances. Then
25,000.
25,000. That is my LTA. So this is my ESI gross. Now let me calculate the amount is basic plus HRA plus medical plus LTA. So 4,15,000 is my ESI gross. 4,15,000 is my ESI gross. So what will be the formula then? 4,15,000 into 3.25%. 4,15,000 into 3.25%. Am I right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So how to calculate the ESI
Yes, sir.
gross is clear, right?
Yes, sir.
But it will not be calculated like this. There is an eligibility criteria. There is an eligibility criteria that ESI gross. Eligibility for ESI is ESI gross should be below 2,52,000. The eligibility of ESI is ESI gross should be below 2,52,000 or 21,000 per month or 21,000 per month. That means if your ESI gross is more than 2,52,000, you will not be eligible for any gratuity. It is not like PF. You will not be eligible at all for ESI. अगर आपका ESI gross 2,52,000 से ज्यादा होगा तो you are not eligible for any ESI. आपको ESI बिल्कुल मिलेगा नहीं. PF में क्या हो रहा था? अगर 1,80,000 से ऊपर होगा, so I will calculate on 1,80,000. But in ESI, if the ESI gross is more than 2,52,000, I will not be eligible for ESI. So what will be my ESI amount? My ESI amount will be completely zero. If my ESI gross is less than 2,50,000, then I will calculate as per the rule 3.25% of that ESI gross. But in this example, as you can see, the ESI gross is how much? The ESI gross is 4.15 lakhs, and that's why this employee is not eligible for ESI. Am I
Sir?
clear?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, Habib sir.
Sir, the eligibility criteria you just say about 21,000 per month, is it like applicable for all the company or specified by?
For all the company across the India, across the country.
Okay, sir.
This is the rule for ESI Act. से मैंने बताया, we are going to discuss in details in labor law class, but this is applicable to all companies.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So now I have given you three different non-receivable parts, and I have given you the formula, and also I have given you the receivable part. Now we have to ensure that the grand total should be equal to how much? The grand total should be equal to 5 lakhs because मेरा CTC यहाँ पर कितना होने वाला है? मेरा CTC should be 5 lakhs. We are supposed to calculate the CTC on 5 lakhs. So there has to be a grand total, and the grand total should be equal to 5 lakhs. The grand total should be equal to 5 lakhs. So let me calculate the grand total. So what is the grand total? Grand total is total of everything. Total of every component. कितना भी component है इसका total करेंगे तो I will get the grand total. तो मुझे इसका grand total करना है. Let me calculate the grand total. So basic plus HRA plus conveyance allowances, we can do it in this way, or what we can do is we can calculate a gross salary. There is also, I can calculate the gross salary. Now what is the gross salary? Gross salary is basically total of every receivable component. What is the gross salary? The gross salary is total of entire receivable component. So what is the total amount? It will be the sum of above. जितना भी ऊपर मेरा है इसको हम sum कर देंगे. So I will calculate the entire amount. So this is my total non-receivable component. Receivable component, which is the total of unreceivable part. But remember, this is not my take home. This is not my take home salary. Take home salary के बारे में हम लोग बाद में discuss करेंगे. Remember, this is the gross salary, but this is not the take home salary. And what is the gross salary? Total of all receivable amount. जितना भी receivable amount है उसका total हो गया मेरा gross. Right? Now, whenever we are talking about the grand total, we need to calculate everything above. ऊपर जितना भी है वो सब कुछ हम calculate करेंगे. So I will calculate basic plus HRA plus this plus this plus this. Right? I have calculated everything. Now, is it matching with my CTC? Is this matching with my CTC? मेरा CTC कितना होने वाला था?
50 लाख.
5 lakhs. So अभी तक मेरा calculation complete नहीं हुआ because I can see that there is some balance. So I need to find out मेरा balance कितना है. So I need to calculate the total balance that we have still left. So CTC के साथ हम क्या करेंगे, इसको माइनस करके देखेंगे मेरा कितना बैलेंस हो रहा है. राइट? 30,375 ये मेरा बैलेंस हो रहा है. बट दिस शुड बी एक्चुअली मस्ट बी जीरो होना चाहिए. और ये जो अमाउंट जो मैंने ग्रैंड टोटल बताया, दिस शुड बी इक्वल टू माई CTC. दिस शुड बी सेम विथ माई CTC. मेरा CTC कितना है उसके साथ सेम होना चाहिए. और ये जो चेक करने के लिए मैंने जो बैलेंस बनाया, दिस इज फॉर चेकिंग पर्पस टू वेरीफाई. दिस शुड बी इक्वल टू 0. क्योंकि जब भी ये 0 हो जाएगा तब मेरा CTC डिजाइन कंप्लीट होगा. लेकिन अभी तक ये 0 नहीं हो रहा है. देयर आर सम बैलेंस ऑफ 30,000. So what I am going to do is I am going to introduce another component now, which is the balancing component. इसको मैंने पहले क्यों नहीं किया? Because this will be the balancing component, and this is called, we can use as attendance allowances. We can call it as attendance allowances. Again, there is no rule for the company. There is no formula, but this is actually the बैलेंसिंग कंपोनेंट. ये हमको बैलेंस करने के लिए बनाया जाएगा. एंड दिस शुड बी डन एट द एंड. ये जो बैलेंसिंग कंपोनेंट है, दिस शुड बी रिटन एट द एंड. सबसे एंड में जब भी मेरे पास बैलेंस करना पड़ेगा, मेरे पास कुछ अमाउंट एक्सेस रहेगा, उस समय हमको ये अमाउंट डालना पड़ेगा. राइट? सो यहाँ पर मेरा बैलेंस अमाउंट कितना था? 30,375. इसको अगर हम डालेंगे और यहाँ पर इसको ऐड करेंगे, इफ वी ऐड, बिकॉज ये तो मुझे ऐड करना पड़ेगा ना, मैंने इसको ऐड नहीं किया था लास्ट टाइम. इसको अगर ऐड करेंगे तो अभी कितना दिखा रहा है मुझे? 0 हो गया. अभी मेरा CTC डिजाइन कंप्लीट हो चुका है. नाउ आई हैव कंप्लीटेड माय CTC डिजाइनिंग. डोंट वरी, आई विल गो थ्रू वन मोर एग्जांपल. तो यहाँ पर मैंने आप लोगों के लिए और एक चीज बना के रखा था, फॉर्मूला देके. वहां पर मैंने जो भी बनाया, आप अगर देखोगे यहाँ पर मेरा फाइनल CTC आउटपुट, वहां पर जो मैंने बनाया उसके साथ ऑटोमेटिकली ये बन गया.